Okay, hi everyone, good morning. Happy Thursday. Welcome to our stretch and strengthen class. This is our low intensity and low impact exercise class. I think there are a couple of people who are new today, so welcome if you are new, and welcome back if you're not new. My name is Shelly, and I'm the physiotherapist at the Society. And the structure of this stretch and strengthen class is we will be starting in a seated position, and then we'll move to a standing position, and then back to a seated position again. So this class is really designed for those who like a class that's a little bit slower paced, and maybe for those whose balance isn't too great, and maybe you would like to hold on when you're in standing. So we do quite a lot of supported standing type exercises in this class. Today is week 2, so we've got 8 weeks of this class, and it is recorded. And so the recordings will go on to our PSBC YouTube channel, usually about a week after the recorded date. So for example, last week's class should already be uploaded on the YouTube channel, and then today's class will go up by this time next week. So if you are someone who would like to review any of the exercises we've done in the class, you're welcome to do so by going to the YouTube channel. If you're not sure where that is, you're always welcome to give us a call, or you're welcome to email us, and we can always send you the link if you need it. Okay. Oh, I see a couple more people joining. Hello, welcome. We're just about to get started here. So as I mentioned, the class starts in a seated position, and then we move to a standing position. So ideally, you've got a chair that won't rock or move too much as you're doing your exercises today. So hopefully not a chair with wheels at the bottom, and ideally not a chair with armrests, just because as we get moving, you just don't want to be hitting your elbow and accidentally hurting your knee or whatever it may be when you have armrests. But of course, with that said, if you only have a chair with armrests, that's okay as well. Just be a little bit mindful as we're moving our arms today to not hit your arms on the chair pretty much. But of course, if you only have a chair with armrests, that's absolutely fine as well. Okay. Now, we are in the Zoom webinar platform, so that means that all of your microphones are already disabled, just so that way we don't get any feedback looping through the audio system today. If you do have any questions, you're welcome to use the chat box, which if you sort of jiggle your mouse a little bit, you should see a little banner at the bottom of the screen, and then there's a square icon. If you click on that, the chat box will open up, and you can type your questions or comments or whatever you like throughout the class. And I will monitor that at the end of the class, because I will be moving with you, so I won't necessarily be able to see the comments right away, but you're welcome to use the chat box anyway. If you prefer not to type your questions and you want to ask over voice, you can use the raise hand function, which is on that same banner as well. And if you click raise hand, then I can manually enable your microphone, and you can always ask your question over voice. Okay, well, let's get started. I'm sure you don't want to hear me talk all day, so we'll get moving. So I'm going to move back here, and you can see that I've got a chair right here that I'm using. So ideally a chair without wheels. So hopefully not like an office chair like this with wheels, but you want a chair that's going to be pretty sturdy as you're moving, so it doesn't tip and things like that. Okay, so we're sitting in our chairs, and we're going to start sitting at the front of our seat. So let me just turn sideways for a second. So as we do the class today, what I don't want to see is you sitting at the very backs of your chairs, or you're kind of leaning into the back of the chair, because if you're in this kind of posture, what's happening is your center of gravity is pretty far back in the chair. And so when you're trying to move, it's going to be really tough because everything is kind of going backwards and you won't have a lot of room in the hips to move and straighten out. So if we sit up nice and tall, so use your tummy muscles and sit right upright over your hips, and then you kind of shuffle your bottom forward such that you're at the front of your chairs, just so that way you have lots of room in your hips and in your arms to actually get moving. So that's a really important starting point. So during the class, try not to be sitting back here, okay? You want to use your tummy muscles, push yourself forward in the chair. Okay. All right, so we're sitting nice and tall. We're sitting at the front of our chairs. And what we're going to start with here is we're going to do a breath in. Then reach those arms up overhead. You're going to lace those fingers together and reach up, stretching up towards the ceiling as far as you can. And then we're going to unclasp our hands and we're going to circle our wrists as we bring the arms down. And we're going to do that again. Breath in, reach the arms, lace the fingers together, big stretch. If you can't go all the way up, that's okay as well. Just go wherever you feel you're able to. Big stretch up through the torso. And then we're going to circle the wrists all the way down. We're going to do 2 more of these. And again, breath in. Stretch up to the ceiling. Hopefully this feels quite nice. And circling the wrists all the way down. 1 more. Again, breath in. Stretch those palms to the ceiling. Really extend through the trunk here. And we're going to circle those wrists all the way down. Okay, now we're going to float the arms up in front of us, have the hands touch. And what we're going to do here is we're going to bring one arm back behind us such that we're rotating to look at the back wall. And then we bring it forward again, same to the other side. We open our arm, let our gaze follow, feet stay planted, but we're kind of twisting, rotating on the spot. And then bring the arm back in. And again, reaching back, letting your gaze follow. You're rotating your trunk to the back wall here. You're kind of twisting like a corkscrew on the spot. I'm going to just move forward a little bit. Twisting. And back in, twisting and back in. So try to stay right on top of your hips as you're doing this twisting motion. So we're not just doing this with the arms. I'm exaggerating. I'm sure no one's doing it like that. We don't want just the arms to move. We want your breastbone to twist with that movement. It's a rotational movement here. So you don't want just the arms going, but you want your breastbone to turn with your arm. Nicely done. Let's do 1 more on each side. Really planting your feet into the ground, embodying this twisting motion. And we're going to let those arms down. We're going to float them back up again to the side, spreading those fingers nice and wide. And we're going to tip our torso down to the side such that our shoulder is going towards the floor. We're reaching our arms in the opposite direction. Really important here that we're not just moving the arms, right? We're not just moving the arms, but I'm keeping my body in this kind of T shape, and I'm taking the whole thing and I'm tipping it to the side. So technically my body's still sort of in that T shape, but we're moving the entire body to the side. So you're stretching to the side of the trunk, and hopefully your hip is not lifting off the chair, but you want to keep the hips planted into the chair. Really ground your hips down, but you're reaching, stretching to the side. Coming back up, drop the arms for a second, float them back up, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side, making sure your hip is not lifting up. Keep the hip planted down, both hips down in the chair, and you're reaching those arms in opposite directions, your shoulder going towards the floor. Coming back up, drop the arms. Let's do 1 more to each side. Keep the hips planted into the chair, nice heavy hips. Last time on the other side. Really giving that torso a good stretch to the side. Coming back up and drop the arms. Okay, stay where you are. I'm gonna turn sideways for a second. Now, this is the only time we're allowed to slouch. We're going to shuffle our bottom back in the seat. We're going to lean back in your chair. This is the only time we're allowed to do a slouch position. And we're floating those arms up behind our ears. And you want to make sure your elbows are pointing out to the side. Don't let your elbows point forward. We're going to open them up to the side such that you're giving your chest a stretch. And then we're going to go up and over the back of the chair for upper back and chest stretch here. Just be careful you're not going to tip backwards over the top of the chair. You want to make sure the chair is not going to flip on you, but you're stretching up and over the back rest of the chair. Nicely done. Breathing, shoulders away from the ears. And we come back up, drop the arms for a second. We're staying in the slouch position and we're going to do that again. Hands up behind the ears. Make sure the elbows are opening out to the side. And then we're going to stretch up and over the backrest of the chair, being mindful not to tip the chair over or hit your head on anything behind you. Breathing, really open the elbows out to the side, stretch the chest. And coming back up, drop the arms, bring your torso up and shuffle forward to the front of the chair again. Sitting up nice and tall, we're going to move on to our neck now. We're going to bring our chin down towards our chest, and then we're going to do a little sort of a semicircle movement here. So you're kind of just going down and to the side, down and to the side with the neck. And as you're doing this, you want to try to make the movement as fluid and smooth as possible. So we don't want it to be like a jarring stop and jarring stop, but you want it to be a smooth semicircle with the movement. Of course, just be mindful if you've got some neck pain. Maybe you want to move it slightly less of a range. And then when you're ready, we're going to make a full circle all the way around. We want to try to aim for this movement the other direction. Aim for this movement to be an actual circle and not like a square with corners where we're getting stuck, but you want to try to draw as big of a circle as you can. It's almost as if you've got a light coming off the crown of your head and you're trying to draw a big circle into the ceiling. Good, keep going. Make sure you're still sitting up nice and tall. Hopefully you're not slouching in your posture. We want to keep our shoulders on top of our hips if we can here. Nice and tall. One more circle. And bring your head back to the middle. Okay, last week we talked a little bit about a neck strengthening exercise. Stay where you are for a second. From the side, what we normally do a lot in our posture is we might find our chins creeping forward and our shoulders hunched forward, and we're kind of in this slouched posture, if you will. Now, the issue with this is because our postures are slouched, we have to lift our head up enough to be able to see our surroundings. So what ends up happening is we have the muscles at the back of the neck gets shorter and the front of the neck gets lengthened but weakened as well. So we kind of want to do the opposite of that. We want to strengthen the front of our neck, but we want to also stretch the back of our neck. So what we're going to do here is sitting up nice and tall, we're going to do a head sliding motion where we're sort of tucking our chin in, almost like we've got a little peach that we're holding under the chin. But it's really important that as we're doing this movement, this is not the same as this. So we're not dipping our head down and looking at the floor. We're keeping our face in the same orientation, but we're sliding the whole thing back. So it's kind of like the analogy we talked about last week, where you see a pigeon walking down the side of the road and they're kind of like this with their heads, right? So their heads stay where they are, but they kind of slide forward. So it's like that, except we're going backwards instead of forwards, if that makes sense. So you want to relax your head for a second and then take the entire head, you're sliding it back, almost like you're holding a little peach under the chin. Hold it for a few seconds and then release. So really important that this sliding motion is not the same as this kind of head down movement. So try it here, join me here in your own time. Try to see if you can do this sliding motion. So imagine that pigeon head, but backwards. And it might feel a little strange to some of you if you're new to this, because our necks probably don't like moving in that fashion since we're so used to being in this forward chin poke type position. So it's important to start this movement, even if it's really subtle in the beginning, to just build some strength in the fronts of our neck and the deep muscles at the front of the neck, as well as at the same time, you should be able to feel a bit of a stretch at the back of the neck. Keep going. Let's do 3 more in your own time. Holding for a few seconds, and then you release. One last one. And rest. I'll come back forward here. Okay, still sitting nice and tall. We're going to circle those arms back. Just make sure you're not going to hit anything around you. And as we do these arm circles here, we're going to start with big circles, as big as you can, as big as your shoulders allow you to do. And then with each passing circle, you're going to make the circle smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until you're doing these small pulsating type circles. Nice straight arms, and we're going to hold this for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're going to circle the other way. So if you're going backwards first, we're going forwards this time. And just like before, we start the circle quite big, and then with each passing repetition, we're going to make the circle smaller and smaller and smaller until we get to that small pulsating circle again. And we're going to hold this for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and dropping those arms. Okay, I'm going to move back a tiny bit. Still sitting up nice and tall. We're going to move on to the legs. We're going to tap the heels forward, alternatively like so. So as a starting point to warm up, you can absolutely slide the heel on the floor and then bring it back in. You can slide the heel on the floor and bring it back in, or you can do a little bit of a lift and kind of tap that heel forward. And now keep doing this for a moment. I'm going to turn sideways to show you. So as I'm doing this movement, I'm sitting up nice and tall. So what I'm not doing is I'm not going like this and leaning back into the chair. I'm sitting nice and tall, keeping my weight over my hips, and I'm sliding that leg forward. So I'm starting to move my hips a bit, as you can see. And my hips, you can see that the range is moving here. And that's what we're aiming for. Just a little bit of a slide. Try to straighten that leg as much as you can. And try to see if you can keep the rest of your body as still as possible as we're sliding the heel forward. So really have that trunk control, where we're not kind of shaking and twisting and bending with each movement, but you want to try to keep your torso as still as a statue as we're moving the legs. Try not to move anything else but the legs. Nicely done. Keep going. I'm going to turn around to face you again. Keep going. So you'll probably notice that if you're sitting really far back in the chair, you're not really going to be able to do this movement because there's just no room in the hips. So you have to sit forward in the chair in order to actually give yourself enough room to be able to do the sliding movement while keeping your trunk as still as possible. A few more. Keep your trunk as still as possible if you can. And then on the next one, you're going to take it a little further. And this time you're going to straighten your knee and lift your leg up in front of you, almost like you're trying to show me the bottom of your heel with each movement. Keep going from the side. This is what it looks like. So see if you can keep your knees as still as they can. So you can see my knees stay where they are, but my foot comes up to kind of meet my knee. My foot comes up to meet the same level as my knee, if that makes sense. So I'm not going like that, right? I'm keeping my thighs still and I'm just sliding, lifting the calf up to meet my thigh, to meet the level of my knee here. And you're keeping your body as still as possible. So we're trying not to twist with every movement, but we're keeping our trunk still as a statue, almost like you are a robot a little bit. And the only thing that's moving is that knee joint. So everything else stays exactly the same. It's just the bottom part of your leg that comes up to meet the knee. So we're trying not to go lift, drop, lift, drop, lift, drop, but we want to keep everything still, and it's just the shins lifting up. Harder than it looks, I know. Keep going. Try to keep yourself upright if you can. So try not to lean back into the chair or sitting up nice and tall over the sitting bones, over the hips. Try to keep your body as still as possible, except for the knee joint that's moving. How are we doing? Okay, a few more. Try to keep your body as still as you can. And we'll rest there. I'm going to turn back to face you. Okay, last one before we stand up. We're going to warm up those ankles. We're going to go ahead and press those toes into the floor and lift the heels up off the floor. And then we're going to press the heels down and lift the toes up. Let me move back a tiny bit more. And again, we're lifting the heels up and then lifting the toes up. Lifting the heels up, lifting the toes up. And we'll keep alternating here, trying to make the movement bigger and bigger and bigger with every repetition. If you can, keep going. I'm going to turn sideways for a second. You can see here, lifting the heels, lifting the toes. And just like before, as we're doing this movement, you want to try to isolate the movement just to the ankles and well, the calves move too because you're moving the ankles, but you're trying not to do a rocking motion with the body as we're doing this. I'm exaggerating. I'm sure no one's doing it like that, but you want to try to keep the rest of your body as still as possible. You want to really dissociate the movement from your limbs and your trunk. So you don't want the trunk to just move every single time your arms and legs move, because you won't have very good control over your limb movement and you won't have very good balance if you were to do that. So you want to try to dissociate your limb movement from your trunk movement if possible. So you're keeping your trunk nice and controlled as you're doing all this other stuff with your arms and legs today. Nicely done. Let's do a few more. Good, and we'll stop there. Okay, so now we're going to practice our sit to stands. So last time we talked a little bit about the technique of the sit to stand, and we talked about always trying to keep our center of gravity over our base of support, which is our feet, at all times. And so what we're going to do with our sit to stand is we're always going to make sure we're at the front of our chair before we even attempt the sit to stand. Because if you're sitting back here and your weight is far back in the chair, no matter what you try to do, it's going to be very tough to stand up. And then we end up doing this kind of thing where we're supporting ourselves with our arms, but because our weight is so far back that we need to pull up on something in order to stand, or we end up pushing the back of our legs into the chair to try to balance and bring ourselves up. So those are not very efficient ways of standing. And so we want to challenge that a little bit. We want to start at the front of our chair, feet flat on the floor, And what we really want to do is we want to bring our center of gravity forward over our base of support. Because until your center of gravity is over your base of support, we're not going anywhere. So we're bringing our body forward over our base of support, in this case, our feet. And then once our weight is balanced over our feet, we're going to push the floor away from us as hard as we can, trying to keep our center of gravity over our base of support all times to stand up. And then we do the same thing in reverse to sit back down. We bend our knees, bring our chest forward, bottom back, but we're keeping our center of gravity over our base of support at all times, right? So as I'm coming down, I'm keeping my center of gravity over my base of support to sit down. Because if I were to bring my weight too far back, I'm going to fall back. Or if I bring my weight too far forward, then I'm going to fall forward. So I want to bend at the hips and I'm bringing my chest forward, but I'm keeping my center of gravity over my base of support, my feet, at all times in order to successfully sit without falling back or falling forward. And then we do that again, same thing. We're bringing our weight forward. We're bringing our weight over directly on top of our base of support. Push the floor away from you. Squeeze the butt cheeks in to stand. And then same thing in reverse. Keep our center of gravity balanced over our base of support in order to sit back down. And so as we're practicing the sit to stand, hopefully you're already joining me here. If you haven't started, please start. So as we're practicing our sit to stands and our stand to sits today, we're going to try to do everything as slow as we can, as slow and controlled as we can. What we want to try to avoid is to 1, 2, and 3, try to use momentum to kind of swing ourselves up and then just plop back down into our chairs. We want to make sure our movements are slow and controlled. Yes, it's more challenging to do it that way, but we gain more control and more strength in our legs and the coordination in our body to be able to do this movement, because that's essentially what balance is you want to keep your center of gravity over your base of support no matter what movement you're doing. So as we're walking, as we're pivoting, as we're turning, our base of support is constantly moving, but it's our ability to keep our center of gravity over our moving base of support that's going to stop us from falling and keep us balanced. But it does take some practice to be able to do these things. And there's various reasons why we might find that challenging. But a good starting point is to practice things like this, where we're doing a sit to stand or a stand to sit. And we're doing it nice and slow, nice and controlled, trying to keep our center of gravity over our base of support at all times. So that way we're not falling forward and we're not falling back. So keep going in your own time, keep trying. And of course, if this is really challenging for you, you might want to have something in front of you just in case you feel like you need to grab hold of something. And the taller your chair is, the easier it's going to be because you're kind of already halfway up. So if this is really challenging and you happen to have a slightly taller kitchen chair, or you can add some cushions on top of the chair to make it taller to practice, then maybe that's a good place to start as well. Okay, let's do one more stand. And on the stand, you're going to stay standing. We're not going to sit back down because we're now going to do the standing portion of the class. Okay, now, as we're doing our standing portion today, please feel free to hold on to something, okay? We need to be nice and safe in the class, so I don't want anyone to take too much of a risk and fall. So if you feel like you're a little more unbalanced today, or whatever the concern may be, it's a good idea to have a chair beside you, in front of you, maybe even behind you, or a wall behind you, just in case you go back, you're at least leaning on a wall. So because in the virtual class setting, I'm not actually physically there with you, so I can't stop you from falling. It's a really good idea to have these kind of safety measures in place just in case. Okay, so make sure you're always holding on if you need to. If you don't need to hold on, that's fine as well. So we're going to start with our weight shift today, just like we did last time. Our feet are underneath our hips, and now We're keeping our body nice and straight, nice and still like a statue, but we're swaying. We're moving our center of gravity to the front of our feet and then to the back of our feet, to the front of the feet, to the back of the feet. Now I'm going to turn sideways for a second and I'm going to let go of the chair so you can see what I mean. So my feet are planted on the floor, my knees and hips are not really moving, and I'm just swaying my entire body forward and then backwards. So it's almost like I'm in a sort of upside down pendulum type movement. So this movement is very different to this, right? I'm not moving my hips forward and back. I'm not bending the knees forward and back. I'm keeping everything straight and balanced on top of each other, kind of like a pencil. You're not wiggly through the middle. You're nice and still like a pencil. And we're just shifting our weight forward at the fronts of our feet and then to the back. And you're kind of testing your boundaries here. You're bring your weight forward. So you're bringing your weight as forward as you possibly can without losing your balance and without having to take a step to save your balance. So you want to keep your feet planted into the floor as you're doing this. And just be mindful to hold on to something if you feel unsteady. Same with when you go backwards. You're trying to move your weight to the back of the feet, so onto your heels, as far as you can without losing balance or without having to take a step to save yourself. You just want to practice this kind of swaying, inverted pendulum type movement here. And you might find that your range is quite small initially, and that's okay. As you get a little bit better and a little bit stronger and more comfortable with this movement, you might find that you're able to then increase that range a little bit. But I just really want you to be conscious in this exercise here where your center of gravity is. And I just want you to feel that kind of translation forward and backwards, you moving the center of gravity, you choosing to move your center of gravity with control over your base of support, like we mentioned a moment ago. Good, nicely done. Now let's try sideways for a second. So your feet stay the same. I'm just facing you now instead. You're going to move your center of gravity from side to side. So you're shifting your weight from one leg to the other. And just like before, this movement, you're kind of like an inverted pendulum again. And this movement is very different to this, right? We're not marching. We're keeping our feet on the floor. We're just shifting our weight. And we're also not going like this, not the same movement. We want to keep everything aligned and the whole body kind of tips sideways, sort of like a statue. Just practicing shifting your weight from side to side. And you really want to feel that you're shifting, you're moving your center of gravity. You're choosing to move your center of gravity to the edges of your base of support. That's what the swaying movement is for, the forward and backwards one we just did, as well as the sideways one. We're kind of just testing our boundaries, our limits of where our base of support is. Really feel that weight transfer. Good, nicely done. Okay, we're going to stop there for a second. So now that we've tested our set of gravity, our base of support limits, we're going to put that together a little bit into a functional movement. So I'm going to turn sideways. I'm going to hold on to a chair. Now you don't have to hold on if you don't want to, but I'm always going to have a chair in the video because I want you to see in the screen that you want to be holding on if you're feeling a little bit wobbly. We want to make sure we're not taking undue risks. Okay, so we're putting that movement together into a functional task now. So we're going to do a squatting movement. Now, a squat looks like this. We basically bend our knees and we stand back up. We're sticking our bottom back like we're sitting in a chair, and then we stand back up. That's a squat. Now, as we're doing this, we want to embody all of the skills we just learned in terms of that weight shift, right? So remember, we were just weight shifting over our base of support. So we're going to try that in the squat movement where we're going to stick our bottom back and our chest forward to almost feel like we're about to sit in a chair behind us. So we're shifting our weight But then we're going to stand back up again, and we're going to squeeze our butt cheeks together to stand back up. And the entire time you're doing this movement, you want to really feel where your center of gravity is, where your weight is on your feet. And we don't want to be bringing the center of gravity so far back that we then start falling back, or as we stand up, we're still back here, or we're falling forward. So it's sort of an exercise to test, to feel how you're shifting your center of gravity over your base of support. So we're standing back up, squeezing our butt cheeks together to stay on top of our base of support. And then we're sticking our bottom back into a squat position, but moving our body, our chest forward in order to stay over base of support. Because if I'm like this, then my center of gravity is way too far back and I'm going to fall backwards. So you're practicing, you're finding that balance where your center of gravity is kind of in the middle, because I'm pulling both backwards and forwards. I'm keeping my center of gravity in the middle over my base of support. And then I'm pushing the floor away, squeezing my bum cheeks to stand up. And now when you're doing a squat movement, the movement is really coming from your hips, not your knees. So the squat is very different to us just bending our knees. This is not really what we're aiming for here. We're not bending our knees and straightening our knees. It's actually coming from the hips. You're bending your hips back and then you're straightening your hips out again. So you should be feeling this movement in your bottom muscles. Squeeze your butt cheeks together to stand up tall. Make sure you're really sucking that butt cheek under as you're standing up, flattening the front of your hips. And then you send your hips back again and then sucking it forward again. So just practice this a few times in your own time, nice and slow if you like. If you feel that you're unbalanced, you're going to go backwards, maybe stick a chair behind you just in case. But you're squatting down as if you're about to sit in a chair, then you're squeezing your bum cheeks to stand up. So even though this is a strengthening exercise for the hips, we're also using this opportunity to practice that weight shift we talked about, keeping our center of gravity over the base of support. You know, I'm talking a lot today. Maybe over-explaining, but I hope it makes sense. So really play around with this movement, thinking about keeping your center of gravity over your base of support. Squeezing the bum cheeks to stand back out. Remember, it's not the same as just bending the knees and straightening them, but we're using our hips. We're bending at the hips, then straightening up at the hips. So it's a hip exercise. Bending at the hips, straightening up at the hips, bending at the hips, straightening up at the hips. Keep going. See if you can do 5 more in your own time. Really squeezing your bum cheeks together as you stand up. Nicely done, everybody. Keep going. Exaggerating that hip movement. You're sticking your hips back and then you're bringing them forward. Try not to emphasize the movement with your knees. The movement should come from your hip. Nicely done. I've lost count. I think I've got 2 more. Good, nicely done. Okay, shake out those legs. Okay, I'm gonna move the chair away for a second. So now you're going to find a wall. Doesn't matter where the wall is facing, but you just wanna make sure the wall has hopefully nothing around that will poke you in the back. For example, a doorknob's probably not very good. You want a wall that ideally has less objects as possible. So you want it to be as empty as possible. So we're standing up nice and tall. We're putting our hips directly onto the wall and our shoulders onto the wall. And we're going to practice this shoulder blade strengthening and upper back strengthening exercise that we did last time. So in standing, we're going to bring our arms up like so. Now, a lot of you will probably have the arms come off the wall like this because that's the posture we tend to adopt. and that's okay. So we're going to have our shoulders and our hips on the wall, and then you're going to squeeze your shoulder blades together as if there's a pencil between your shoulder blades, and you're squeezing the pencil there. You're squeezing your shoulder blades together to try to bring the entire back of the arms onto the wall. So from the side, it looks like this. I'm squeezing my shoulder blades together to bring the arms back, and I'm relaxing. I'm squeezing my shoulder blades together and relaxing. So if I come down this way for a second, so from the back, this is what it looks like. I'm squeezing my shoulder blades together to bring the arms back, and I relax. Squeezing to bring the shoulder blades together, and then I relax. So we're doing the same thing here on the wall. You're standing with your hips and your shoulders on the wall, and then you're going to squeeze your shoulder blades together to place the arms on the wall, and then you relax. And then we're going to do it again. Squeeze the shoulder blades together to bring your arms onto the wall as close as possible. If your arms are already on the wall to start, excellent. Then try to squeeze those shoulder blades together even more. So almost like you're pressing into the wall. In your own time, keep going. And as you're doing the squeezing movement, you want to make sure you're not going, sticking your hips off the wall or you're sticking your chest off the wall. You still want to keep your back against the wall as you're squeezing the shoulder blades together, shoulders away from the ears. Nicely done. On the next one, you're going to hold that squeeze and keeping your shoulder blades together and the back of your arms on the wall. You're now going to slide from side to side. So you're kind of tipping down to the right, and then you're tipping down to the left. And you're trying to keep your arms, the back of your arms, on the wall at all times. So it's kind of like you're dusting the wall with your arms here. And you're keeping your hips, so you're not lifting the hips off the wall. We're keeping the hips and shoulders on the wall, squeezing your shoulder blades together to bring the arms back. And then you're dusting the wall with the back of your arms. Keeping the shoulder blades squeezing as you're doing this. Your back is against the wall at all times. We're not lifting the back off the wall. Nicely done. One more to each side. And let's drop the arms for a second. You can shake it out if you like. Okay, last exercise before we do a stretch. We're going to move back to our neck strengthening exercise. Now, do you remember at the beginning when we were sitting down, we did this one? That kind of reverse pigeon head that we did at the beginning. So remember I was talking about pigeons walking down the side of the road and they're always like this with their head. So that's the movement you're aiming for, but we're going backwards. You're taking the entire head and you're sliding it. You're sliding it backwards, almost like you've got a little peach under your chin. And the sliding movement is very different to this. So we're not bringing our chin down. We're not looking up at the ceiling. We're keeping our face exactly where it is, but just sliding the whole thing back so it's over our shoulders. So hopefully you remember that exercise. We're going to do that now in standing against the wall. So in standing, shoulders and hip against the wall, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to slide that head back such that the back of our neck and the back of our head is now against the wall, hopefully. You're going to hold that contraction for a few seconds, and then you're going to relax. And then we're going to repeat that. Sticking the head back, holding for a few seconds, and then relax. You're pushing into the wall, essentially. I'm going to come closer. You keep standing by the wall. I'm going to come closer. So the neck, you're doing this. You're bringing it back. So the whole thing stays in one place, but you're sliding it back. And so imagine there's a wall behind me. I'm sliding it back to bring the back of my neck and the back of my head onto the wall, and then I'm going to relax again. And relax. So it almost feels like you're making a double chin sort of with this movement. You're tucking the head in. Now, on the next one, when you slide your head in, we're going to add something. So when you slide back next, you're going to hold this contraction and you're now going to rotate about 45 degrees to one side, back to the middle, still holding that contraction. And then you're going to rotate the head 45 degrees to the other side and back to the middle without losing the contraction. So what I don't want to see is we do this and it's beautiful. And then as soon as we turn our head, we're like this and the chin pokes out again. You want to keep the chin in and you're kind of rotating on the axis. You're rotating on the axis and you come back in, same to the other side, rotating on the axis and bring it back. So we want to avoid this as we're doing the head movement. You're keeping the head tucked in and you're rotating your head on the axis. You're rotating rather than swinging forward. You're rotating on the axis. 45 degrees to one side, back to the middle. 45 degrees to the other side, back to the middle. Keep going against the wall. I know this one's a little bit tough, but keep at it if you can. So think about that analogy of the pigeon. You're sliding the head back, you're engaging the deep muscles at the front of the neck, and you're maintaining that contraction as you're rotating your head 45 degrees to either side. Think about making that double chin. Nicely done, everybody. And let's rest there. Okay, we're going to bring our legs apart and we're going to bend to one side to stretch our inner thighs. And then we're going to come up and do the same thing on the other side. Let me just move the chair so you can see me. So I'm bending to one side. From the side, it looks like this, such that I'm stretching the inner thigh on my straightened leg. And then I'm going to come up and do the same thing to the other side. Good. One more on each side. Stick your bottom back, straighten your back if you can, and then you should feel that stretch on the inner thigh a little more. Okay, hold on to a wall or a chair. We're going to do a thigh stretch. So you have two options here. If you can grab hold of your foot and you can pull it back towards your bottom, keeping your knees in line. So don't let your knee come forward. You want to keep your knees in line and you want to push your hips forward to really feel a stretch at the front of the hip and the thigh. Now, if you're not able to do this, that's okay. You can bring a chair behind you or a stool and you put your leg on the chair behind you instead, keeping your knees in line. So remember, don't let your knee come forward. Keep it in line. You push your hips forward in order to stretch the front of your hip and your thigh. Same thing. And of course, the higher the chair, the more of a stretch you'll feel. Good. Let's switch sides. Same thing on the other side. Keep your knees in line. Push your hips forward to straighten and stretch the front of the hip and the thigh. Or you can use your hand and pull the foot towards your bottom, whichever one works for you. Okay, we'll release that. We're going to do a calf stretch. So we're going to bring one leg behind us, one leg forward into a lunge position. You're bending your front leg, you're straightening the back knee, and you're reaching that heel towards the floor. And you're tucking that hip in. So you should feel the stretch of the back of the calf. You're reaching that heel to the floor. If your heel is this far up and you already feel the stretch, bring the leg in more so you can try to reach that heel towards the floor. If you don't feel the stretch, bring the leg further out and really reach that back heel to the floor and straighten that back knee. Okay, and switch sides. Same thing, you're reaching that back heel to the floor, really straighten that back knee. If your back knee is bent, you won't feel it as much, at least not in that same muscle we're targeting. Really reach that back heel to the floor, straightening that back knee. Nicely done. And coming back up, this time, one leg forward, one leg back as well. But we're going to bend the back leg and straighten the front leg such that you feel a stretch in the back of the thigh. You're hinging forward at the hips, keeping your back as straight as possible, and you'll feel that stretch. You'll feel that stretch in the straightened thigh. Coming back up, same thing on the other side. Bring the leg forward, bending your hips back. One leg straight, one leg bent. And you should feel at the back of the straightened thigh. Okay, now we're going to stand in front of our chairs and we're going to sit down again. So sitting down exactly like before, we don't want to just drop into the chair, but we want to keep our center of gravity over our base of support at all times to slowly lower down, controlling the descent. Okay, I'm going to turn to face you so you can see me. We're going to do a trunk stretch and sitting. We're sitting forward in the chair, right? So we're not sitting at the back of the chair like this. We're sitting nice and tall and we're scooched to the front of the chair. We're going to take our arm and we're going to hold on to the opposite knee. And then the other arm's going to wrap around the back of the chair, grab onto the chair, sit tall, and then you're going to pull yourself around into a rotational stretch. Nice and tall. And it's almost like you're trying to look at the back wall. Keep breathing. Don't hold your breath as you're doing this. Keep your spine long. And we will release. Same thing to the other side. Take your hand, hold on to the opposite knee. Other arms wrapping around the back of the chair. We sit tall and we're rotating around on the spot. So we're not twisting to the side, but we're twisting in the middle. We want it to be a rotation directly over our hips. And back to the middle. I'm going to turn sideways for a second. We're going to do our upper back and chest stretch. We're going to bring ourselves back in the chair, lean into the back of the chair. And we're going to bring the arms up behind our ears. Open the elbows out to the side such that the elbows are pointing outwards rather than forwards. Elbows pointing outwards. You're stretching your chest. And then we're going to stretch up and over the backrest of the chair. So we can feel a stretch in the upper back and the chest. Just be careful not to tip the chair here. Breathing. Shoulders away from the ears. And we come back up, drop the arms for a second. Let's do that one more time. Bring the arms up behind your ears. Make sure the elbows are pointing outwards rather than forwards. Bring the elbows out and we stretch up and over the back of the chair, breathing. And we sit back up. Lower the arms, sit up nice and tall, shuffle to the front of the chair again. And we're going to end with our breath in, float the arms up all the way up above the head, lace the fingers together, and we're going to stretch our palms towards the ceiling as far as you can, like you're pulling your torso up away from your hips. And then we're going to circle the wrists all the way down. 2 more. Same thing. Breath in, float the arms up, lace the fingers, stretch the palms towards the ceiling like you're trying to pull your spine away from your hips. And circle the wrists all the way down. One more, same thing. Float the arms up. Stretch the palms toward the ceiling. This time maybe do a little bit of a shimmy from side to side, stretching. And circle the arms down. All right, that's it. Thank you, guys. You've just done the second class of the Stretch and Strengthen series. I hope that was fun. And I hope you felt like you got a little stronger, you did a little bit more stretching. Now, if you have any questions about any of the exercises we've done today, you're welcome to type in the chat box, or you're welcome to send me an email, which I'll put an email here in the chat box for you. Whoops, there you go, except the last A is not capitalized. I accidentally put a cap box on the last A, but it's syu@parkinson.bc.ca if you needed to ask any questions. So remember, the Stretch and Strengthen class is for 8 weeks. Today is week 2. And this is our lower impact and low intensity class. So if you're looking for something little more high intensity, or you just want to try a different type of class, you're welcome to look at our Tuesday boxing class with Doug Picard. You can sign up through our Parkinson's website, and that would be something good to try if you haven't done boxing before. If you have done boxing before and you're just looking for a little bit of a challenge, you can sign up for that class. We do also have a new voice exercise class, a voice projection exercise class that's coming up in February on Tuesday. So after the boxing class ends, in February, we are starting a voice class with Natalie, who is a speech and language pathologist. So for those who are looking for a bit of voice exercise and practice, you're welcome to sign up for that class. Okay, all right. Well, that's it for me, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Please do let me know if you have any questions, and please do look on our Parkinson Society website for all of our future exercise classes. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Happy Thursday. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you next week. Bye, everyone. Thank you.